Hey, welcome back to the Inside Out podcast. For some of my viewers, you may know if you're watching my podcast regularly that almost all the guests that I have on are personal friends. But today I have a new friend on, and this sort of defines my life, the way that I meet people in a very synchronistic way. So I want to introduce you to first-time author but longtime writer, Aaron Bracy today. He's got a great story to tell. We met, interestingly enough, at my daughter's sorority fundraiser at a place called Deke's Barbecue on LaSalle University, right off the campus there. I happened to see that Aaron had a stack of books on a table, so I approached him to ask him about his book, and he lit up. It's such a great story, and it's such an accomplishment. You can see it right here, a Soaring season, the incredible, inspiring story of the 2003-2004 St. Joseph's Hawks. So this is the synchronistic part, Aaron. We were just talking about this a little bit. First of all, welcome to the show, and
Thanks so much for having me. So excited to be here.
Good, great. I can't get over it sometimes, the way things work in life. I can and I can't, because it does define my life, but it's still nonetheless like oh my God kind of moments. Aaron and I are both first-time authors. His book just came out March 1st. We are both freelance writers. We're both teachers. And I found out today that used to be one of your first sports writing gigs was for the Mainline Times, which is owned by the parent company Today Media, who owns the Italian American Herald that I write for a monthly wine column. So we're connected even though I'm just meeting you, right?
There's all these crossovers, and I went to Deke's thinking I was going to sell a bunch of books, but there weren't a lot of St. Joe's fans there. It was before a St. Joe's LaSalle game, and it didn't work out. So I only sold a few books. But I met you and the podcast, so I was like, felt like it would be a success.
Right, exactly. So I really appreciate you coming on. Well, your story is so moving. I read a little bit of it online, and why don't you tell the folks your website where they can find more information, because I'm going to mess that up for sure.
Yeah, the website is big5hoops.com. And do you want me to tell the story about the book?
Yeah, I want you to tell the story about the book.
Yeah, so first of all, I've always wanted to be a sports writer. From the moment I was in high school, I used to read the Philadelphia Inquirer with my morning cereal, and I always wanted to be a sports writer. And I felt like to be a sports writer, I needed to read a lot of books. I needed to read good books. So I set out to read the top 100 sports books of all time. And so I went through all these books. I'm like, man, as I read more, I'm like, man, I would really love to write a book one day. And I had a few ideas here and there, but they were always taken. Every idea I had seemingly was taken. So in 2023, I had a website, big5hoops.com, and I was like, maybe I'll write a feature story on the 20th anniversary of the 2003-04 St. Joseph's Hawks. Not a book, just a feature story. I was like, wait, maybe that's the book that I've always wanted to write. And so, long story short,
Right. But I was reading about how when you're one of your first interviews when you were a student at St. Joe's University was walking into like just totally naively walking into Phil Martelli's office or calling his office and asking for an interview, and you got the interview.
Yeah, so it's kind of a cool story. I wanted to be a sports writer, and so I started out actually for the St. Joseph student radio station. And the first game that I did was Phil Martelli's first game of his coaching career at the University of Delaware. I might have been just a statistician. Now, the St. Joseph student radio station, at the time, there was no internet, no streaming. The feed might have went to the cafeteria, and that's if everything was working perfectly. So there might have been like one person listening. But anyway, I did the game. The next day, I'm like, hey, I'm a sports writer. Aaron Bracy, Bill Lyon was my idol in the Inquirer. And so I was like, well, what would Bill Lyon do? Bill Lyon would go to Phil Martelli's office and ask him about the game.
All right.
So I went to his office, and the secretary was there. I said, hey, Aaron Bracy from the St. Joseph student radio station here to talk to Phil Martelli about the game. And she's like, do you have an appointment?
Oh, the false bravado, right? I'm just going to walk in, right?
I was like, oh, do I need one? She's like, hold on. So she goes back, and Phil, being the very welcoming, accommodating person that he is, I don't remember anything of the conversation, but I do still remember to this day being in his office. And I told him this, I said, if you didn't talk to me that day, chances are I still would have gone forward with this career. But the fact that you talked to me kind of made me really know that, hey, this is what I really like to do, what I really want to do. So
it gave you the confidence too to know that if you could walk into Phil Martelli's office unannounced and get an interview, well, of course you were a student there, but
I only knew that everyone wasn't as accommodating as Phil Martelli.
That's true. A couple of my guests that have been on so far, and especially Anthony Gargano, sports writer, everybody knows Anthony. He's actually a personal friend too. We talk about how Philly has always been an underdog, and I always say we were in the shadows of New York for in a lot of areas, maybe in the arts or business. We're not anymore. We're not underdogs anymore, even though, you know, that little bit of that Rocky mentality still lives within all of us, you know. So can you relate that to your story?
Yeah, absolutely. And Philly is always
2003.
You're right. I mean, you look around, just this building, the city is beautiful. And I don't think Philadelphia takes a backseat to anyone. I'll say that as a lifetime Philadelphian. But we do have that underdog mentality. I think much of it is from Rocky. And this book, I think, is an underdog story. I think it can be an inspiration to people. Like these players, starting with Jameer Nelson, who was the star of the team, he wasn't recruited by any of the so-called power conferences because of his height. He's 5'11" tall. So they just looked at him and said, oh, you're not tall enough. Many of the players on the team wanted to go to other schools. The other schools didn't want them. So they ended up at St. Joe's. Phil Martelli, the coach, he wanted to be the coach at St. Joe's since the time he was in 8th grade. And yet, when the job came open, when he was an assistant, he was not even considered the first time around. These guys came together in a way, and they showed that through teamwork, through hard work, working together, it doesn't matter, like, if you have the best things, and the best could mean anything. Like, you don't have to have the best to be the best. You don't have to be the biggest to beat the biggest. And that's kind of the story.
I think a lot of things have to come together, just like this year's Eagles organization. You know, a lot of things have to come together for a sporting team to succeed. And I think some of the best, most inspirational movies, there's been so many that come to my mind just as we're sitting here talking. So maybe, who knows, the Soaring season may someday find its way onto the big screen, right? Just like Invincible or Rocky or the story about the U.S. Olympic hockey team and Miracle on the Ice. Yeah, something like that. But you also had, and now one of my other guests is a friend of mine, Mike Cotto, he's an author, and he said that when you're writing from pain, when you tap into pain, right, there's an authenticity that comes through. And if you felt tears, and he quoted Stephen King quoting somebody else, if you feel tears, the reader feels the tears. You do have a personal story that influenced or gave you the time to start to write this book.
Yeah, and so not to sound morbid, but both my stepfather and my father died within 9 months of each other. And at that time, I realized, like, hey, like, life is like very precious and we don't have forever. Like, what do you want to do with your life while you still can? Like, I was going along every day and our lives are very busy, and I just stopped and said, like, what do I want to do while I can? And writing a book was always one of it. And so I kind of set my mind at that time to like writing a book, and it was like a godsend. Things all came together. We mentioned like you and I meeting, but like it was like my job, I moved from social studies to ELA at my job at McGraw-Hill, which is a publishing company. And I started reading all these great fiction novels. Now they're geared towards young adults, but they like kind of inspired me a little. And then Phil Martelli randomly called into a Twitter Spaces show that I was doing and started talking about this team without me bringing it up. And it was like all these things came together, and I was like, you know what? It's meant to be, and I got to figure out, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it.
So the lesson was, in Lost, you realize how short and precious life is.
Absolutely.
Right? So do something. Just do it. Just do it.
Absolutely. And the thing is,
somebody said that. Somebody came up with that tagline.
Yeah, right? It's very popular in Eugene, Oregon, throughout the country. But yeah, just putting one foot in front of the other, like not knowing exactly. When I started this, I didn't have a publisher.
That's my next question. So go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't have a publisher.
Did you get in the hands of a publisher?
I just decided, like, hey, I'm going to write a book.
Right.
And I started doing interviews and one thing after another. I put it out there on social media also kind of to hold myself accountable. And also so that, like, if anyone else had the idea, like I had sort of owned it.
All right.
And Mike Sealski, who's a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, helped me and kind of tutored me a little bit about how to do a book proposal. I had used Google to help me.
Like the synopsis, the queries, and all that?
Yeah, like I didn't realize what went into the proposal was like, I wrote as much for the proposal as like half the book, seemingly. It was a lot.
Right.
And I just kind of cold emailed about 20 to 25 publishers. I got about 10 responses, and
that's a great margin of return, believe me.
Yeah, I was really excited and ended up getting narrowed down to 2 or 3, and Brookline was, I really liked, they were enthusiastic right away in book.
Right.
And so
Well, and right on Brookline Road, where they're located in Havertown, is a McGillicuddy's Pub. And on the menu, they have a sandwich named after each of the big 5 schools.
Okay. That's
For
what it
big
meant to
five,
be.
they have, oh, I'm not going to name them now, but they have the hawk sandwich. They have one for every one of the big five. What you're saying is true. And I always tell a funny story about the publishing of my own book, how that was another synchronistic event in my life, because when I was a little younger, I had written what I thought was a fairly good children's book, and I had it professionally illustrated. And I did all the research on the proposal, the queries, the submissions, the synopsises, how to do it. I sent out 150 to 150 either publishing houses or literary agents, and I got 150 of the nicest rejection letters.
Right.
Now, children's books are a really tough market because there's so many out there. Fast forward to years later, I was in Sedona, Arizona on a retreat, and I was one of the practitioners of one of the sessions that I took was talking about children's books, and I happened to tell her about that story. I'm like, yeah, oh, I didn't say I got a rejection. I just said, oh, I wrote a children's book once, and she said, oh, my goddaughter is a publisher. One thing led to another, and that's how my book up. It's another story, but today we're here to talk about your book. But it's amazing. So 10 people responding to you, that says to me two things right off the bat. One is you're a great writer, and two is you have a great story.
Yeah, I thought it was, I thought the story, and any success the book has starts with the story. It's an incredible story, and I thought that the story would be really interesting. It was, this team captivated not just the city of Philadelphia, but the entire country 21 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know why. Like, what was it about that team that pulled people into them? And I think really what did that, and I think what people will learn reading about it today, is kind of what I said before, is like, you can kind of do anything. And like, speaking of the rejection letters, like, you got 150 rejection letters and you didn't give up. Every rejection letter that I got, for me, it just made me more determined.
Right.
And these guys on this team were rejected in various ways. And yet they came together to do these like amazing
incredible things. And these are the stories that inspire everyday life and us as human beings, especially athletes, I think, college basketball, I have to admit, I'll go to a game, I can understand the game, but I really watch football religiously, but college basketball, I never really understood the brackets. So one day I was in Vegas and I was walking through the casino, and it happened to be during March Madness, and there was a wall.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
mean, it was bigger than life, and it broke down the brackets. And I went, oh, I get it. This is how they mean, what the brackets are or whatever. But it is, I mean, it's huge. There's so many, are there fantasy teams for basketball like there is for football?
Yeah, there's fantasy stores for everything. But the bracket is big, and we're talking on the first day. Well, we're talking on the Thursday of the NCAA tournament. The first four happened on Tuesday and Wednesday. But anyway,
so you're giving us time during the height of your season.
Yes, and
what better time though for this?
Yeah, it's a great time for the book to come out. March Madness is so exciting every year. Unfortunately for Philadelphia teams have not been in the NCAA tournament now for 3 straight seasons. It's been a bit of a down year, down period for Philadelphia teams, which is disappointing for this great tradition of the Big Five.
All right.
But the tournament itself is still amazing.
Yeah, so usually in Philadelphia, it's Villanova, LaSalle, St. Joe's, Temple, and Drexel?
Penn, and you got Drexel as well.
Right. Yep. So when you're on your website for
Big5hoops.com.
Big Five Hoops, do you cover all of them?
I do. And I cover all the teams. I try and get to as many games as I can, probably more than my wife would like. And we just, the season, more or less, for the Big Five just kind of finished up last weekend.
Right.
So it's kind of like crashing a little bit now. I will be at the Final Four, which is exciting, the NCAA Final Four in April, which is in San Antonio. I'm really excited to be there.
Cool.
That should be fun. But yeah, March Madness is great. It's a great time of year. The weather's getting nice.
And you're a St. Joe's undergrad yourself, as you said, right? So was that your favorite team, obviously?
Well, growing up, it's strange. Like, Temple was my team. I loved John Chaney. Like, I loved Aaron McKee, Eddie Sharon. I just loved I loved what he stood for. I loved the way he coached. I loved the way his teams played. So Temple was kind of my team. And then actually, believe it or not, Villanova was kind of a team that I followed, partly because they were on television all the time. And they had won the national championship in 1985. They were on TV. I didn't know that much about St. Joe's until I actually got there. When I got there, I kind of fell in love with the place, being a student there, like the basketball tradition, I learned about it. And that all helped including, and also the contacts that had helped in writing the book.
Yeah. I mentioned to you, I teach at LaSalle University as an adjunct, and this past semester I had 2 guys from the men's basketball team and 2 women from the women's basketball team in my class. And they were excellent students too, by the way, academically. They weren't just coasting with the
Basketball.
athletic scholarships or whatever, but yeah. I was just going to ask you something else and it went in and out of my mind, but while I'm pausing my brain, why don't we let our viewers know where they can find the book and you and
absolutely,
your
A Soaring Season, the incredible, inspiring story of the 2003-04 St. Joseph's Hawks. You can get it wherever books are sold, on Amazon, big5hoops.com, Brookline Books, and it should be in all the local bookstores, if not today, very soon.
Great. So we have a couple more minutes and we could chat some more about now, are you still freelance writing for sports, like columns and stuff? Where are you writing?
Yeah, so I've been, for the last, since well, I started when I was at St. Joe's in 1997, I've been writing for the Associated Press as a freelancer. And I've done that pretty regularly since 2008, covering the Phillies, the Flyers, the 76ers. And I'm still doing that, although the Associated Press has cut back on people like myself, freelancers. So I'm not expecting to do quite as much. But big5hoops.com, cover college basketball in the city. And I'll probably be doing stuff for, I do something for something called Hoops HQ. It's a college basketball website, and you'll see me in other venues and other outlets as well.
That's great. This is exciting. How long did it take you to write the book?
Well, I started in December 2023, and I did my interviews between December 2023 and May 2024. And then I began writing. I had written the first chapter, which I submitted to the publisher, so I had already done that. But I wrote between May and August, and so it really was, it was like a 9-month, even less, maybe 8 months,
Yes, right.
But I was working like around the clock,
Right.
Yeah.
I know. I started writing my book actually as vignettes. It wasn't intended to be a book. I worked at a famous Philadelphia restaurant when I was in college at Temple. Actually, it was a transfer to Temple my junior year. And years later, I'm still friends with all the women I worked with. We were at lunch and we were telling the hilarious stories that every restaurant has. And one of the women said, "Natalie, you have to write these stories down." So that day I went back to my office and it was a light day and I just started to write a few vignettes just for that group of girls. Put it down. A year or so later, I picked it up, put it down. A year or so later, it started. And actually, here's another coincidence. Now that I'm talking about this out loud, my father had passed away and I had some more time on my hands. My daughter was young, but I had spent a lot of time taking care of my dad. He was sick. And I just started to write and write and write. And what I realized was that working at this restaurant was really my coming of age story.
Right.
And I had a full manuscript, but in the beginning it was like vignettes, and then it went into like a fluid story. So I had to do some work to correct that, And it wasn't until this connection through Sedona in 2020 that I was connected with this publisher, the Awaken Press, Lindsay Deerking. And when I first sent her my email or reached out to her, actually she reached out to me. She called me because she was given my number, which floored me that she even called me. She said, we talked about children's books. And as a PS, I said, I'm going to attach a couple chapters of my book I wrote. I don't know if it's your thing or not. When we got together, she said, I want to publish your book. So that was really cool. So mine was a long time, but then we went into a developmental editing where I almost rewrote the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
Not rewrote it. Reorganized it, and with her guidance, like in suggestions for things to add or delete or things like that. So anyway, it takes a long time, but that's pretty fast, but you had it in you and you were ready.
Yeah, and I knew I had a deadline to meet because we wanted to get it out by March 1st. So I had to get it to them by the end of August.
Right.
And I didn't want me to be the reason why I was delayed, so I made my personal deadline even earlier. So yeah, so it was pretty intense, but
motivated and determined that
absolutely.
Here it is.
I
So
know,
I
it's
can't wait to read it myself.
Yeah, it's surreal to have a book that has my name on it. And like when I read through the manuscript, as it was still like kind of, it was like cool. But then when I actually got the book and read the book, like I've been a lifetime reader, Natalie, and to actually read a book with my name on it is just.
I know, there's nothing like it, right? There's nothing like it. It's a fun ride. It is a fun ride. I had a blast. Well, I'm so appreciative of you coming on, Aaron. It was so great to get to meet you better. And maybe someday our producer, Kevin Hackenberg of this podcast, who his company GK Films will maybe someday is going to make a feature film.
Well, I own the film rights.
He sees it. Okay, there you go.
So, and I specifically negotiated for that because that's on my list of ideas. For
Yeah, great. Well, I wish you all the luck in the world. I know it's going to soar, just like the
so
Soaring.
much.
It was nice.
Appreciate it. Great meeting you, Natalie. Thanks for having me.